Hi guys, welcome back to my X-Men series. In today's review, we have X-Men Apocalypse. X-Men Apocalypse takes place in the 1980s and it follows the X-Men who must defeat an ancient all-powerful mutant who intends to thrive through bringing destruction to the world. So I'm gonna let you know in this review what are the good things about it, what are the bad things about it, and what I think of the film overall. So first of all, I just want to say that this is only my second time watching the movie. The first time I watched it, I found it quite hard to get through, even though I am a huge Marvel fan. Just felt it was quite boring, but this time it was a lot better in my opinion. You can really appreciate the directions they took a lot more when you rewatch this movie. So, you know, there's some things which happen when you're first watching it, so you don't know what's gonna play out, and by the end of it, if you think back, you're kind of thinking, oh, what was the point of showing us that? But then if you rewatch it knowing what happens, then you can kind of appreciate those little moments a bit more. Probably my favorite thing about this movie is how it handles all the rebooted characters. As you know, younger versions of the characters were established in X-Men First Class, and in X-Men Days of Future Past they brought all of them together, branched it off into a different timeline, which is where this one takes place. I really liked how much time and attention the new characters got. Well, they're not really new, but you know, different versions of the characters such as Jean Grey or Scott, they had much more depth to them. The original trilogy of X-Men movies, I wasn't a huge fan of Scott and Jean because they were one of the main characters, but I didn't really feel like I knew them too well. Whereas in this, we get to see them meet, we get to know a bit more about them and just get a better look at them overall. When there is emotion in this movie, most of it is brought thanks to Magneto and Michael Fassbender's fantastic acting. There are some good moments also with Professor Xavier, played by James McAvoy, where McAvoy and Fassbender play off each other very well, and that creates for quite a lot of emotion. They're probably the two standouts in this movie, but most notably, one of the most emotional scenes in this whole franchise takes place in a forest. I'm not going to say too much more, but if you've seen it, you know what scene I'm talking about. And in Days of Future Past, we got to see the new character, Quicksilver. He also had this very cool scene, but they didn't use him too much in that movie, which I was kind of happy with. You know, didn't have to squeeze out every little bit of content which has him in it. But in this movie, he returns with an even greater scene to introduce himself, but he's also involved with it more. He becomes more of a proper X-Men, I guess you'd say, which I'm glad they went in that direction with him. Now we're moving on to the negatives. One thing that instantly pops into my head and many people's heads when they watch this movie, or if they've seen it, it's very slow, especially in, I'd say, half an hour to 40 minutes. It's very slow as they're trying to establish all the new characters, villain. It really made me lose interest in what the characters do. It does pick up, I'll give you that. It gets better as it goes along, but obviously you can fall back to that it's in a franchise and we know these characters already. But one of the more important things about the movie is how it begins, you know, if it can engage the audience. Even though it did pick up this movie, it was still riddled with a lot of pacing issues, and at points it dragged or was very slow. As I said, if it wasn't a franchise, this could have been a less enjoyable movie. Like, then again, I guess they didn't have to do as much if it was just a solo film unrelated to anything before. I think that's why I had such a difficult time when I first watched this. Now that I've rewatched it, I can understand what these beginning bits are, which are very slow before, but some of them are just really dumb. You know, in the comics or whatever, Apocalypse, he's the big bad of the X-Men kind of franchise part of the comics when they're not teamed up with the Avengers. So if you look at the big bad in certain things, you know, so we have Thanos, the main one that comes to mind, big bad of the MCU. He lived up to the hype. With the Joker from the Dark Knight trilogy, or even Bane, you know, the big bad they did not let down. But Apocalypse is meant to be big bad of the X-Men. As we can see in this movie, he's very powerful, but he only uses his powers on defenseless civilians. So when it comes to actually needing his powers, we see some tricks where he could just easily decapitate someone, but he doesn't use them when he actually needs to, when he's actually facing a problem. I didn't find him that menacing. He reminded me of these early 2000s, late 90s villains where he was very corny, mainly with his dialogue, the way he just shouts to the world. They did add some cool sound effects to his voice, which made it a bit more creepy, but as a big bad, I didn't find it too menacing, as he's an ancient, powerful mutant, supposedly the first mutant. He's been dead for thousands of years, and that is where the audio of the whole rest of that video cut out. So here I am, a few hours later, re-recording, but we continue. So as I was saying, Apocalypse, he really wasn't that menacing, especially for the big bad of the X-Men. Just in general, I thought the way he catch up on the events of the world was quite silly and stupid, how he could just put his hand on TV, absorb it, and say the word learning, and then he suddenly knows everything about the world's history. But even with the stakes, on paper they seem pretty huge. It's like, this is the end of the world stuff. I know that's common in comic book movies, but in previous X-Men movies, yeah, we've seen stuff in Days of Future Past which could be the end of the world. In First Class, we've seen stuff on the verge of another world war, but then there's other stuff about mutants just trying to stand out. But this one is in debate for being the hugest stakes of any of the X-Men movies. It just feels so underwhelming, and I think that's mainly because I mentioned in the pros that a lot of the emotions come from Magneto, but it doesn't feel like there's any emotion going into the final third. And as much as there's cool action in that act, there doesn't feel like any emotion. Doesn't feel like what they're fighting for matters. They're just fighting for the sake of it, for the entertainment, and I found that hard to appreciate from this movie. I must say though, on my rewatch of X-Men Apocalypse, I did enjoy it a lot more than when I first watched it. I think it's because I now understand what the stuff in the beginning which made it so slow was intended for. So now that I've watched it knowing that it actually kind of matters, I can appreciate it more. But I do not think this film is one of the best X-Men movies. I don't think it's as bad as X-Men Origins or X-Men The Last Stand, but I don't think it's as good as X-Men First Class or any of the stuff up there. So I need to find a scale somewhere, and since I think it gets a lot more hate than it deserves, I think I should put it on par with what I gave The Wolverine. So I'm going to give this movie a 7 out of 10. Like I mentioned in my intro, this is part of an X-Men series that I'm doing in lead up to the New Mutants, which is bound to be released very soon. If you'd like to see any more of those videos, I'll leave a clickable card up in the corner right here. Anyways, just thank you for watching. I'd really appreciate if you like and subscribe. It would mean a lot to me. But I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you in my next video.